Impeachment trial. Suspended Attorney General Ken Paxton will formally face articles of impeachment in the Texas Senate September 5th, and his wife, State Senator Angela Paxton, won't be allowed to vote. And we'll show you the results of a new poll about what Texans think of Paxton's impeachment. Property tax standoff. The Texas Senate passes a new bill to cut your property taxes amid the ongoing and bitter standoff at the Texas Capitol between Republican leaders. Plus, we speak one-on-one with both Texas Senators John Cornyn and Ted Cruz while they were in Dallas, and meet two Democrats running for a newly opened seat for Congress in North Texas and hear their priorities. Hello, I'm Jack Fink. Get your fix for Texas politics. Eye on Politics on CBS News Texas starts right now. We begin with the historic impeachment of Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton. We now know his trial in the Texas Senate begins at 9 a.m. on September 5th at the Capitol. And among the rules, Paxton's wife Angela, a state senator from Collin County, won't be allowed to vote on any of the proceedings. The first thing many people have wanted to know about the Texas Senate impeachment trial against suspended Attorney General Ken Paxton is if his wife, Senator Angela Paxton, would be allowed to serve as an active juror. It was the last of the rules considered and approved by state senators. David Cole, an appellate attorney in Dallas, says that's telling.
That shows they talked about everything else, and that was the hardest thing to work out. And that rule reflects a compromise.
And under the rules, Senator Paxton cannot be a juror.
But she is not allowed to vote on any matter, so not just the ultimate vote, but any procedural point that comes up along the way.
But state statute still requires Senator Paxton to be on the Senate floor during the trial. So while there will be one less senator voting, only 30, her presence means all 31 will be counted. And that raises the two-thirds threshold needed to convict Paxton on each article of impeachment to 21 votes, up from 20.
So the higher the threshold, the harder it gets, and sometimes one vote is all the difference in a case.
Senator Paxton, who was one of 3 senators who voted against the trial rules, said in a statement today, "These rules state that I am ineligible to vote on any matter, motion, or question before the court or to participate in deliberations. These same rules prohibit me from saying more about the proceedings." Ken Paxton's lead lawyer, Tony Busby, issued a statement saying, "Now that the Senate has adopted the rules, we look forward to proving every count of this sham impeachment is baseless." The attorneys hired by the Texas House to prosecute the case against Paxton, Rusty Hardin and Dick DeGuerin, said, "The rules provide a fair trial for both sides. We look forward to presenting our case." Now to the politics of impeachment. A new poll by the Texas Politics Project at UT Austin shows overall 50% of those surveyed believe Paxton's impeachment was justified, while 17% say it was not justified. 33% say they don't know or have no opinion. And when it comes to Republicans, it was very close. 31% say it was justified, while 30% believe it was not, and 39% say they don't know or have no opinion. The research director at the Texas Politics Project, Dr. Joshua Blank, tells us those 39% are persuadable, and the political pressure is on the Republican senators who have to consider Paxton's fate.
Is that no matter what they do, they are going to create hard feelings amongst some of their voters. And that's why this process feels so torturous at this point and why it's so difficult for them to move forward with it.
The U.S. senators representing Texas, Republicans John Cornyn and Ted Cruz, have differing opinions on Paxton's impeachment. Cornyn has previously told us that the allegations against Paxton are troubling. Cruz told us this week it was a mistake for the House to impeach Paxton and that voters had heard about the accusations against him before going to the polls last November.
The allegations that the House moved on, all of those allegations have been public a long time. The criticism of Ken, that's been public a long time. And we just had an election. We had an election where Ken's opponents, this was their principal argument. They spent millions of dollars making exactly these arguments. And the voters of Texas made a decision. They decided they weren't persuaded by these arguments.
Now to an update on another big story reverberating through the Texas Capitol, the ongoing bitter political standoff over how to cut your property taxes. This week, the Senate passed a new bill with the goal of finally providing relief to home and small business owners. The new property tax relief bill passed in committee and by the full Texas Senate unanimously and quickly. It provides $18 billion in total property tax relief. It's $400 million more than previously budgeted, but senators say the state has the money. Under the bill, homeowners would see their homestead exemptions rise to $100,000. Senators say that provides savings of nearly $2,600 to most homeowners for the first 2 years and nearly $3,000 in savings for the first 2 years for homeowners over 65. The new Senate bill also doubles the business franchise tax exemption to nearly $2.5 million. This means 67,000 small businesses in Texas wouldn't have to pay a franchise tax at all. That's worth about $600 million of relief. Now that the Senate has passed the bill, it must be considered by the House, which approved its own bill favored by Greg Abbott weeks ago. That bill did not increase the homestead exemption, but laid out a path to eliminate school property taxes within 10 years. Senators want House Speaker Dade Phelan to call House members back to the Texas Capitol. And Governor Abbott has said he wants both chambers to work toward a solution.
And we want, in all sincerity, the Texas House to return and pass this bill. I would ask Governor Abbott to take a serious look at this package and support the package.
You see Democrats and Republicans standing here today together. Yes, there have been issues in the past that we have not agreed upon, but this is one that we agree upon for all of our constituents.
The Senate's new legislation comes after the governor vetoed a total of 77 bills, the second most in state history, in an effort to get lawmakers back to the bargaining table and get a property tax relief bill to his desk. My colleague Andrea Lucia reports.
On the majority of his vetoes, about 2/3 of them, Governor Abbott had no opposition to the bills. In fact, he wrote something like, "This is an important issue." It is simply not as important as cutting property taxes, Abbott wrote in vetoing dozens of bills from the Senate. In 9 bills from the House, it was education freedom he wrote lawmakers needed to approve first, referencing efforts to institute a school voucher program that have failed to pass that chamber.
For a governor to veto multiple bills with which he actually agrees, that is, veto pieces of legislation that he initially supported, is a pretty extraordinary measure, and it shows how deeply committed he is to pressuring the legislature.
SMU political science professor Matthew Wilson says this is by far the most public disagreement he's ever seen among the state's top 3 Republican leaders. Among the bills vetoed was one written by the Dallas County DA's office, making it a felony to tamper with a fuel pump. Criminals, a prosecutor testified, are rigging pumps to dispense gas at virtually no cost and draining stations dry.
So these vigilant store clerks are catching them, and vigilant police officers, but if they haven't stolen the fuel yet, that's a Class C misdemeanor. Slap on the wrist.
Another vetoed bill would have created a municipal management district to finance a potentially $2 billion master plan community set to be created in McKinney, where housing is in high demand.
It's funding very expensive infrastructure and enhancements that really make the place come alive.
The governor wrote he's willing to reconsider 59 of his vetoed bills, allowing them to come up in a future special session, if and only if his priority bills are passed first.
We're really getting to see all the details of the sausage being made right now, and that's not doing anybody any good who's in a position of political authority in the state.
Well, right now, the House and Senate do appear locked in their positions on property tax relief, with each chamber blaming the other for the lack of progress. Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick did say there are back-channel conversations going on, but no sign yet of an agreement. Andrea Lucia, CBS News, Texas.
Some lawmakers expressed anger and disappointment after the governor vetoed their bills. It can take months for lawmakers to develop legislation and then get it passed in both the House and Senate. And sometimes it takes multiple legislative sessions to get it done. Also making headlines, former West Texas Congressman Will Hurd is now running for president next year. He made his announcement exclusively on CBS Mornings, making him the 12th Republican in the primary.
The fact that inflation is persistent at a time when technologies like artificial intelligence is going to upend every single industry, and our kids or their scores in math, science, and reading are the lowest they've ever been in this century.
How in the world, Congressman, do you break through when everything is so hyper-partisan, people are so angry?
Yep.
And, you know, everybody says Donald Trump clearly leads the pack at this point. How in the world do you break through at this time?
So someone like me, right, a dark horse candidate can pull this off. One, you can't be afraid of Donald Trump. Too many of these candidates in this race are afraid of Donald Trump. But we also have to articulate a different vision.
Hurd has criticized some of former President Trump's tweets. He served 3 terms in Congress before retiring in 2020. Hurd now works in the private sector. Coming up, more on our interview with Senator Cruz, what he says about the indictment against former President Donald Trump. And we also spoke one-on-one with Senator John Cornyn about the Trump indictment. Eye on Politics on CBS News Texas. We'll be right back. Welcome back. This week, both of Texas's U.S. Senators, John Cornyn and Ted Cruz, were in Dallas to attend Mayor Eric Johnson's inauguration. We spoke with both about why it was important for them to go and about the federal criminal charges filed against former President Donald Trump. We begin with Senator Cornyn. Senator John Cornyn, thank you so much. You're going to be administering the oath of office to Dallas Mayor Eric Johnson today. How did this come about, and why was it important for you to be here?
Well, the mayor asked me, and he and I have gotten to be friends over the past couple of years, and found a number of things we needed to work on together. I had the privilege of representing 30 million Texans, and he represents a really important, big part of our state here in North Texas, the city of Dallas. And so I'm honored to be here and administer the oath and say a few nice things about it.
Wanted to ask you, you were walking with Opal Lee, the grandmother of Juneteenth in Fort Worth yesterday. You played a role in that, making this a federal law. And so what was it like for you to walk, and why was that important?
Well, number one, it was really hot, which really impressed me. Miss Opal, she's tough, and at 96, she is a force to be reckoned with. But she came to see me in Washington, D.C. a couple of years ago, and she's been advocating to make Juneteenth a national holiday for a long time now. 28 states, including Texas, already had it as a state holiday. But the more I thought about it, the more important I thought it was that we do this, because many people simply don't remember our history. People don't understand that while we started out in a very bad way with slavery when the country started, that we had a civil war, we have the civil rights era, and we have come a long way. We've even had an African-American president of the United States. So I think we need to celebrate how far we've come and acknowledge that we still have work to do. So I'm proud of to be able to have a hand in recognizing Juneteenth. I think it's a teachable moment, an opportunity for a lot of our children. And I worry a lot that we've forgotten a large part of our history.
Political questions now. As you know, Senator Cruz is up for re-election next year. Obviously, you'll be supporting him as a fellow Republican.
That's right.
Why is that?
Well, because I simply think the Biden agenda has been tragic for the country. High inflation. Our country's lost credibility abroad with the disastrous withdrawal from Afghanistan, turning over the Taliban, all the weapons that were left behind. Not informing our allies. I much prefer Republican policies and Republican leadership, and I certainly do not want to see Democrats get a foothold in Texas, because once that happens, then I think it's unlikely that we'll be able to elect a Republican president again in the future if we lose Texas to the other party.
Also wanted to ask you about the indictment and the charges against former President Trump. Have you read the indictment, and how serious, I mean, you're a former judge, a former Attorney General of the state of Texas, how serious are these charges against him?
They're very serious. You simply do not take classified documents out of a secure facility. I happen to be a member of the Senate Intelligence Committee, and I review classified documents on a regular basis each week. This is information our adversaries would like to get their hands on, and that's why you handle them in a very scrupulous and careful manner. But the problem seems to be not that so much just that he had these documents, that when he was asked to return them, and he did not do so. And I think, unfortunately, he's created a circumstance for himself, which is, I think, very, very serious. The problem is, a lot of people feel like President Trump has been picked on from the Russian collusion case, the Steele dossier, and those sorts of things. And I find myself in agreement with those who say, yes, that was unfair. There was a double standard as it was applied to President Trump during the Russian collusion scandal. But this one is basically something that he's admitted to, all of the material facts. And we'll have to see what the judge and jury does. I saw the judge has already set a trial date for August, which is pretty quick, which is something that special counsel has asked for. But this is out of my hands. This is out of the hands of politics now. It's up to the courts to make the decision.
You've said that you think it's time for the Republican Party to move on from President Trump. What do you mean by that?
Well, you know, in politics, unless you can win an election, you're pretty much irrelevant. And I just think it's critical that, given the direction of the country now under the Biden administration, that Republicans nominate somebody who can win a general election. President Trump has a very enthusiastic following among a lot of his base. But one thing I've learned through numerous elections is, yes, that's fine in a primary, but the goal is not just to win the primary, it's to win the general election. And to do that, you have to appeal to a broader range of voters, not just your base. So as a tactical or practical matter, I have concerns about the president's ability to win in November, and I think winning in November is critical.
And just this morning, it was announced that the president's son, Hunter Biden, has entered into a plea deal on the federal tax and gun charges. What's your thought on that? I know details are just coming out. It's a plea deal.
Yeah. Well, I think it both answers some questions, but leaves others unanswered. Many people were concerned that Hunter Biden would get off scot-free because he was the president's son. That obviously is not the case, but it does raise questions of where the income that he failed to pay taxes on came from. And so a lot of the investigation that the House of Representatives is doing in terms of the payments that were made to Hunter Biden by foreign companies, mainly because he was the president's son, and what that means for other people in the family, that remains to be seen.
Texas Senator John Cornyn, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it.
Thanks, Jack.
Thank you. And now, more of our interview with Senator Cruz. Senator Ted Cruz, thank you so much. We appreciate it. You're here today for the inauguration of Dallas Mayor Eric Johnson as a guest. How did this come to be, and why is it important for you to be here?
Well, Mayor Johnson's become a friend, and I think he's done a really good job for the city of Dallas. You know, he and I are both fathers with relatively young kids, and you know, he came in to do a really hard job. Being mayor of a big city, being mayor of Dallas, is not an easy job. And I'll tell you what I really admire about Eric is that he had the courage to take on some of the far left voices in his own party, in particular when it concerns law enforcement. Some of the voices calling for defunding or abolishing the police. Mayor Johnson said no, said that's not good for the people of Dallas, that we need strong law enforcement here in Dallas to keep people safe. And I think the people of Dallas are a lot better off for that. I admire the courage that Mayor Johnson demonstrated in standing up for the men and women of law enforcement. I think it made a difference. You know, Mayor Johnson is someone I work with quite closely. Both John Cornyn and I have added Mayor Johnson to our Federal Judicial Evaluation Committee. That is the bipartisan committee that reviews every application to be a federal judge in the state of Texas. And the way John Cornyn and I handle both judgeships and U.S. attorney positions in Texas is that when there's a vacancy, we put up a public posting, and anyone is open to apply. They apply on the merits. And we have this group, this Judicial Advisory Committee, that is by design bipartisan. It's serious lawyers from every region of the state of Texas who are respected. They interview those nominees. They give us their judgment, and ultimately, Those nominees get forward to John Cornyn and me, and we interview the very best of them and make our determinations and send those on to the White House. And it says something about what both John Cornyn and I think of Mayor Johnson, that both of us enthusiastically agreed he should be part of the team advising us on who should be a federal judge in the state of Texas. And he's someone I respect, and so I'm glad to be here for his inauguration.
I wanted to ask you, obviously you're running for re-election, and since we last spoke, Congressman Colin Allred from the Dallas area has announced he's running against you. There may be other Democrats entering the race. So I'm wondering what your reaction is to that, and what is the basis for your re-election?
Well, listen, there'll be plenty of time to talk the specifics of politics. My re-election is going to be focused on my record over the past 11 years, fighting for the state of Texas and winning for the state of Texas, delivering real results to Texans in terms of jobs, in terms of an economic environment that makes Texas the envy of the world. There's a reason 1,000 people a day move to the state of Texas, and they have for over 10 years. What we're doing in Texas works: low taxes, low regulations, an environment where small businesses prosper, and freedom. Look, Texans want our constitutional rights defended. We want the Bill of Rights defended. I've spent my entire life defending the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, defending free speech, defending religious liberty, defending the Second Amendment, defending all of the fundamental rights that Texans expect and deserve to have protected. And then finally, I'd say security. Texans want to be able to raise our families in an environment that is safe and secure. That means we want strong law enforcement that can keep us safe from violence. That means we want a secure border so that we don't have the flood of illegal drugs that is coming into this country. Last year, tragically, over 100,000 Americans died of drug overdoses. 70% of that came from fentanyl, Chinese fentanyl coming across our southern border. I think Texans want a secure southern border, strong law enforcement. Jobs, freedom, and security are the priorities of Texans, and that's been my priority from day one.
You've criticized the indictment against former President Donald Trump. As a former Solicitor General, have you read the indictment against him, and how serious are the charges against him?
Well, I think these indictments are really unfortunate. I think they do serious damage to the rule of law. You know, you think of our nation's history, we're over 200 years old. We have never had one administration turn around and indict the preceding president. That's something, frankly, banana republics do. That's not something we do in America. In this case, the Department of Justice is applying an obvious double standard, a double standard to Donald Trump, whom they hate, that they're not applying to Joe Biden. Joe Biden had classified documents stuck just about everywhere, including in a box in an unlocked garage next to his classic Corvette, and yet DOJ is not prosecuting Joe Biden. Hillary Clinton's misadventures with classified documents and destroying emails and destroying evidence, those were legendary. And yet the Biden Justice Department doesn't apply these standards to her. And I gotta say, I think most Americans, regardless of where you fall on the ideological spectrum, whether you're a Republican, whether you're a Democrat, most Americans, if you're being honest, you can recognize this is a double standard. This would not be applied if his name was not Donald J. Trump. And I gotta say, I'm an alumnus of the Department of Justice. The Department of Justice is meant to be apolitical. It's meant to apply the law regardless of party. And so applying a double standard, treating it essentially as a political enforcement arm for the White House, I think that's incredibly dangerous. And so I have to say I'm deeply disappointed. I think Merrick Garland has proven to be the most political attorney general this country's ever seen, and I think that's doing real damage.
Texas Senator Ted Cruz, thank you so much for your time. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
As you heard, Cruz is focusing on his re-election for a third term in the U.S. Senate next year. Now that Democrat Colin Allred is running against him, Democrats are lining up to fill Allred's congressional seat. We'll speak with two candidates when Eye on Politics on CBS News Texas comes right back. With North Texas Democratic Congressman Colin Allred running against Senator Cruz next year, his seat representing the 32nd Congressional District in North Texas will now be open. This week, we spoke with two of the Democrats running, State Representative Julie Johnson of Farmers Branch and trauma surgeon Dr. Brian Williams of Dallas. We begin with Johnson, who explained this week why she got into the race. You've been a Democratic state representative, and now you are running for Congress. Why, and what is the rationale for your campaign?
Yes, I am running for Congress. You know, it's been an honor to be in the state house, but it's clear to me that we have a lot that needs to be done at the federal level. And I believe that I have the experience and the opportunities necessary to be the best representative for CD 32.
And what is the rationale of your campaign? What is it that you hope to accomplish? I mean, why are you running? What needs to be done in your mind?
Well, a classic example is healthcare. I have really focused on healthcare access in the Texas legislature. I've passed numerous bills that would improve people's opportunity to get the healthcare that they so desperately need. But state law only regulates 13% of healthcare in the state of Texas, and federal law really governs 87%. And so I want to take what I've learned in the state legislature, I want to take the deep foundations of understanding and experience I have of legislating in the healthcare space to the national level, because Texans are at a crisis for healthcare access.
And what are your other top priorities if you are to win this in not only the primary and the general election?
Well, the state of Texas needs so much, right? We are grossly uneducated. You know, we consistently rank in the bottom of educational opportunities and success. We always need to focus on jobs and improving access into the employment market. And that also comes with the educational space. Are we training the next generation of workers? Are we giving people the opportunity to get employment at a rate where they can support their families at a living wage? And are we also giving businesses the workforce that they need to continue to expand and create opportunity in the state? And then lastly, we really need a place, an environment in our country where everyone has the right to live their full life, where government isn't discriminating against their LGBT people, against people with disabilities, against people based on their race and ethnicity. And we really need leaders who are going to be champions of everyone's opportunity to fulfill their own American dream.
And taking your three top priorities there in the healthcare space, I mean, obviously you were in Congress representing, yes, North Texas, the 32nd Congressional District, but you're also voting on its national legislation. And so what would you like to see healthcare-wise that is not now in part of federal law?
Well, one of the things I've really focused a lot at the state level is removing a lot of the administrative burdens of access to care, such as prior authorizations. You know, these administrative limitations that health insurance companies put are really designed to keep patients from accessing the care that their physicians are prescribing. And so, for example, I just read a thing that Medicare, we need to remove these obstacles in Medicare. Remove these obstacles in federal health plans, these burdensome prior authorizations that really seek to put administrative hurdles in place where physicians can't prescribe and patients can't receive the treatment. That's one of the first issues I want to tackle right away.
Can that be done without adding to the cost of healthcare?
Well, absolutely. I believe that these burdens increase the cost of healthcare. You know, my wife is a physician, and I see firsthand in her own medical practice all of the administrative personnel that they have to hire to meet all of these burdens. When you seek thousands of patients and you have to go through a burdensome prior authorization process for every single procedure, every single prescription, that takes huge amounts of time. Most physicians spend way more time on the administrative requirements of meeting insurance demands versus actually rendering patient health care. And I think if we could streamline those and make them much more efficient, that would actually reduce costs and give our medical personnel much more opportunity to actually treat patients. And so they're not waiting for months and months for appointments.
Let's talk about jobs and workforce, which you mentioned. What more should and could the federal government be doing?
Well, we need to really encourage educational partnerships in the private sector. Are we providing the employees that employers need? Are we providing the skills necessary? And so really look at maybe reinventing how that looks. And we did a lot of that in the state legislature, especially with community colleges. really looking at technology programs and to make sure, are we providing the training necessary? And then I think the next level for that is tuition replacement and grant opportunities in high demand fields. For example, the Texas legislature, we just passed in our budget opportunities for nurses to get tuition assistance and grant programs if they go into medicine in certain high-end, high-need areas that are underserved, to incentivize students to go that, because the cost of getting your education is very, very expensive. So many people can't afford that. And I think the federal government needs to step in and try to make college more affordable, not only for four-year institutions, but also more trade-based training. You know, we have a crisis of construction trades, for example. We are not getting people, incentivizing them to go become master plumbers and master electricians. And we just need more people in the workforce. And I think the federal government needs to step in and try to incentivize states and incentivize our university structures to provide these opportunities.
And then the other top priority you mentioned is helping communities feel as if, various communities, feel as if they are equals.
Yeah.
And so talk to me a little bit about that, and specifically, what do you think the federal government needs to do that's not being done now?
Well, I'm a proud member of the LGBT community. I've been married to my wife for a long time. I have 2 children. I've been very active in the LGBT community for decades. And I have never seen the level of hate targeted to the LGBT community in particular that I see right now. It's very, very disturbing. And there's this wave proceeding through our state legislatures where they're really aggressively targeting our right to marry, our right to love, our right to work, our right to seek health care. And so it's become very clear to me that the federal government must pass the Equality Act as soon as possible. And we have to prohibit this kind of discrimination against the LGBT community, period.
And what would the Equality Act do?
Well, it would prohibit discrimination based on LGBT issues on your status. And so right now, we don't have these same kinds of constitutional protections. And it will provide that you cannot discriminate, for example, in healthcare. Like, there's a bill in the Texas legislature, it's the Drop Dead You're Gay bill, that says a physician can refuse to treat you based on their belief structure on whether or not LGBT people should have a right to exist. That's unacceptable, and we cannot allow that to happen. The Supreme Court has given us the right to marry. There are definite groups operating out there, because it was done by the Supreme Court, that want to try to overturn Obergefell, similar to how the Roe decision was overturned. And it just needs to be fully protected once and for all.
So you're talking about codifying it into federal law,
Yeah.
but are you talking about a constitutional amendment or just a law?
I don't know if it has to be a constitutional amendment, but the federal government needs to pass the Equality Act. It's been offered. The House has passed it last session. The Senate didn't get it done. It needs to get passed.
This may be a crowded field that you're entering, and I'm wondering, why do you believe you are the best Democrat for the primary and the best candidate for the general election?
Well, it is fundamental that for Democrats that we hold CD 32 to defeat Kevin McCarthy and get a House majority in the House. So how do you do that? Well, you have to have your most experienced and the best and the brightest that you have. I have already demonstrated that I can campaign really, really hard. I've flipped my seat. I've already know how to win an election, how to mobilize a base, and how to turn out voters. I also have the experience necessary, not only from my legal background of a long time of history of representing people, but just having now done 3 terms in the Texas House, I have a pretty good command of the issues, and I'm ready to get to work day one.
I wanted to ask you just about a couple of issues that we've seen in the headlines. How would you have voted on the debt ceiling budget cuts, the deal between Speaker McCarthy and President Biden and the Senate as well?
Well, I would have voted to increase the debt ceiling. We cannot have our federal government go into default. That is an unacceptable option. And so I would have voted to approve that.
And what about the budget cuts? I know that was part of the deal. You would have gone along with that.
Well, you know, I think it's responsible to have a responsible budget. You know, we do have to start to look at reining in some of our government spending. There is no doubt about it. But, you know, we cannot default on our national debt. That is an option that just cannot be allowed to happen.
And internationally, you know, foreign policy-wise, what country to you stands out as the most dangerous to the United States, as far as, you know, China, North Korea, Russia, Iran, for example, or is there another country? How do you feel about the dangers that those countries face, and is there any one particular country that is more dangerous than the others that the United States really needs to be very concerned about?
Well, all the countries that you mentioned, North Korea, Iran, Russia, and China, are all very dangerous to the United States. And you can make an argument, actually, any one of those is the most dangerous in a variety of lenses that you look at it. I do think that we have to have comprehensive foreign policy to protect our national interest, protect our security around the world, protect the concepts of democracy, protect safety, and protect our homeland. You know, I'm very concerned about the internet attacks on our community and the infrastructure. Those are coming close to home in a very serious way. I'm very concerned about Russia's interference with our electoral process. I'm very concerned with the fact that North Korea and Iran would love nothing more than to detonate nuclear weapons on our shores. So, I mean, they're all very, very dangerous. And, you know, our foreign policy issues are critically important, and we need to make sure that we are a good partner with our allies throughout the world to where we stand with us, and the United States just doesn't always go it alone. Because we are a global economy, we're a global world. What happens in one country can affect another. Climate change, for example, affects us all. The internet affects us all. And so we have to be good partners in order to protect our shores.
I also wanted to ask you about the border. Obviously, as a member of the state legislature, this has been a very widely discussed issue. And I'm wondering what your take is on the Biden administration's policies and the situation that we've all seen unfold at the border in the last several years.
Well, I've been disappointed, honestly, with the federal government's response to immigration on both parties for a long time now. You know, we need comprehensive immigration reform at the federal level. We need immigrants in our country. We need them for our workforce and for our country to continue to expand and grow. And to make it so difficult for people to come to this country in a legal process is one of the reasons why people are coming to this country in an illegal process. For example, a physician that worked in Sue's office, she's from India, fantastic physician, very smart, has saved the lives of thousands of Texans. It took her 16 years to get her citizenship interview. 16 years. That's unacceptable. You know, so many people come here with a legal visa or come here in a legal status. They meet somebody, they have a kid. If they have to leave, that might be 15 years before they can get another visa to come back. Well, who's going to leave their kid and not be able to do that for 15 years when it takes that long? We have to do a better job of funding our immigration agents, our process, to streamline it, to make it to where people have a reasonable wait time to be able to be here in this country in a legal fashion. So our border is a mess, and we have to do something about it. And that is critical 101 for any member from Texas, for any member from these border states, to get in there and try to come together and work on a comprehensive immigration plan that can get passed. I do think that what the Biden administration has done by setting up these checkpoint centers in other countries to say you'll have priority on your visa applications if you go through this process in another country before coming to our border has helped a lot. It's, from what I understand, it's really reduced a lot of the backlog at the border itself. So I think that initiative has been very smart.
And my last question to you is there anything else that you want people to know about your campaign?
Well, get involved. You know, we're here to serve the people of CD 32 and to be a strong advocate for health care, for jobs, for educational opportunity, for workforce, to make your life better. You know, families are struggling. People are still not through COVID, and they're not through the impact of the inflationary prices that have had on their pocketbook. It is harder to buy food. It is harder to pay for gas. Affordable housing is becoming a critical mass. We have got to get people who have the experience and the understanding to go into DC who can make stuff happen on the very first day, and I'm that person.
Julie Johnson, thank you so much. We appreciate it.
Thank you for the opportunity.
And now Dr. Brian Williams, who explained why he previously entered the race as well. So you were running for Congress. Why? And what is the rationale for your campaign?
Jack, I'm running for Congress because we are in a crisis, and I've always responded during times of crisis. This was an ethic that I internalized during my earliest days as a cadet at the Air Force Academy, and I've continued that throughout my time as a doctor and also serving on the Hill. So we have a crisis of an epidemic of gun violence, which is a leading cause of death for American children. We have health care that is inaccessible and affordable to millions of Americans, and we have an ongoing attack on reproductive freedoms right now. So as a veteran, I respond to the call, but as a doctor, I've seen firsthand the impact that some of these policies have on my patients. And I'm running for office to be part of the solution. And I've also had a chance to work on the Hill. I served with some of the most influential Democratic leaders of our time to actually work on these laws that will uplift billions of Americans. I served for Senator Chris Murphy, and we passed the gun safety bill last year, which is the most significant gun safety legislation in nearly 30 years. Worked in the office of Speaker Pelosi, working on healthcare affordability, accessibility, mental health reform. So I've seen this work. It seems hopeless sometimes, but I've seen what is possible on a bipartisan basis in Washington. And me running for office is just a culmination of the work I've been doing for the past 7 years since the mass shooting of police officers here in Dallas in July 2016, which was a moment that changed me and made me realize there is more I can do to serve my community and promote healing outside the hospital. And that's why I've chosen to run for office now, to be part of the solution and have the privilege and responsibility to serve my community I call home as their representative in Congress.
So talk to me a little bit about, because I remember, obviously that dark day here in Dallas, the shooting of those officers. And I remember you being in the ER and one of the doctors to talk about what happened and the care that was provided to these police officers. And so talk to me about your decision then to work in Congress behind the scenes.
July 7th, 2016, that's a night that I still think about every day. It is always with me, and it was a transformative moment for me. My inability to save those police officers that night is something that sticks with me, and I still remain close to some of the family members, some of the survivors from that incident. But after that, I realized that there was only so much I can do in the hospital in my white coat to promote healing within our society. There was much more I can do outside of the hospital. And that's when I began to think, what can I do? The Mayor Rawlings appointed me to chair the Police Review Board. So I had a chance to work in the community with the police officers, the police associations, city council, and community members to how do we work to promote healing and trust between the police and our civilians. Judge Jenkins asked me to serve as a special advisor for health equity during COVID. So I had a chance to serve the county as well to promote health equity and accessibility to healthcare during one of a once in a century pandemic. And I just carried that work with me when I went to Washington last year to work on these policies and laws that will impact millions of Americans. So when we look back to 7/7, I can really define my life before that moment and after. And now here we are 7 years later, and it's really just the culmination of everything I've done in the last 7 years. Now looking to my community to say, I want to be your representative in Congress. I want that obligation, the responsibility, and that privilege. This is my home. This is where we're raising my daughter, my wife and I. It's personal to me, it is special, and I look forward to the chance to let the community members know that, hey, I can be your leader in Congress.
And why do you think you are the best Democrat in what will be a crowded field to, run and be the nominee?
I got into this race because there's a crisis going on. So as a veteran, I've internalized this ethic of service before self. I have a special relationship with the flag and what it means to serve our country. And I've been doing that since I was 17 years old at the academy, but also watching my father put on his uniform as a youth growing up. As a trauma surgeon, I've had to tell too many mothers and fathers that they've lost their children to gun violence. And that is something I want no other parent to have to endure. I've also had to take care of patients who don't have access to affordable health care and seeing how that impacts their lives. These are issues that as I'm going around the district and meeting people, they bring these up. Gun violence, the recent shooting in Allen, rocked our community. Texas has had more mass shootings than any other state in the country since the tragedy at Uvalde last year. We have more than one mass shooting a day. So gun violence is an issue. I've seen it from the front lines, but I've also had a chance, Jack, to work on solutions. When I served in Senator Chris Murphy's office last year, we passed the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act. This is a gun safety bill law that will save thousands of lives. That was done on a bipartisan basis. So I've seen how progress can be made. For healthcare, worked on a variety of laws as well. So I've been to the federal level. I've seen the process of having an idea for a law, writing it out, getting it approved by the lawyers, having it go through committee, and getting it passed in the House or in the Senate as well. The only thing I have not done, Jack, is I have not been a member of Congress to vote on the bill. So now I'm asking the community I call home to send me back to Washington to continue and finish the job that I've already begun.
You talked about some of the issues that are important to you. So are you saying gun violence and reproductive rights and access to health care, are those your top three priorities if you're elected?
So those are my top three priorities as a representative in Congress. However, it's really important to be as a representative to listen to what's important to the community. And those top three priorities for me also happen to be issues that come up repeatedly as I'm touring the district and meeting community members. But I think what's more important is the values of the person who is representing our district in Congress, right? And the values I learned as an Air Force officer is that we put the needs of the people we serve above our own. It is service before self. And this is the value I will take with me to Congress. And that also requires me to listen to what the needs are of the members of the district. So yes, I do have these top priorities. They also have the top priorities of people whom I've been talking to in the district. However, policies change, times change, and the person that is representing us in this district will be there for years to come. And they need to be someone who will represent the needs of the district. This is my home. We are raising our child here. And again, this is personal to me, and I want to be the person that represents my community, my neighbors, my friends in Congress.
So let's talk about the issues that you raised, gun violence. What do you think, you know how it is in Washington right now. Republicans control the House. It's close. And in the Senate, the Democrats are in control. There's obviously President Biden is a Democrat. So, there has to be working across the aisle. So what do you think, as it relates to gun violence, could pass? What would you like, what more needs to be done in your mind that realistically has a chance of passing?
So some things we need to do to save lives from needless firearm-related injuries is raise the age to purchase assault weapons. When I was a cadet at the academy at 18 years old, I trained on the M16, which is a military version of the AR-15. I understood then that that was a weapon of war that had no place in the hands of untrained civilians or on our streets. And we were done that day training. I couldn't take it home with me to my dorm. It was stored in a safe storage facility. So we can one thing we can do is simply raise the age to 21. And how that will save lives, first of all, 18 to 20 years old, the number one cause of death for them is firearms. That age group also commits firearm homicides at 3 times the rate of people 21 and older. So that age 21 is a key age that we can do to reduce death due to firearms. As a trauma surgeon, I can bring a very unique voice to what's missing in Congress. There's only 19 doctors in Congress, only 4 of whom are Democrats. There's not a single trauma surgeon. There's never been a trauma surgeon. I have operated on patients. I've seen the human carnage that comes from gun violence. I've held the hands of mothers and fathers who have had to tell that they've lost their children due to gun violence. That is perspective that we need at the table as we craft solutions. There also has never been a black doctor to cast a vote in Congress. So when we talk about health equity and what's happening right now, that is also a crucial voice. So when we want to craft solutions, and I've been a part of this for in the past with other health-related legislation, as well as gun safety legislation, we need a variety of voices that understand from the front lines what we are trying to solve. And adding my voice to the table as someone who's been on the front lines and as someone who has also lost family members to gun violence, that would be crucial to crafting laws that promote safety for all Americans.
Healthcare. What more needs to be done in your mind on a federal level?
So we continue to have millions of Americans that do not have access to health care and cannot afford health care. When I was working in Speaker Pelosi's office, worked on a variety of legislation. Medicaid was one of them. Texas is a non-Medicaid expansion state. Therefore, we have chosen as a state to leave millions of our Texans without access to health care. So had a chance to work on what can we do to expand Medicaid across the nation and ensure everyone has a chance to have access to affordable health care. The drug pricing bill was passed last year, which would make medications more affordable to millions of Americans. So there's a wide variety of things that has continued to be, that we need to still do on the healthcare front. But what I do, again, there's only 19 doctors in Congress, so it would help to have another doctor that understands what the day-to-day work is of caring for patients and doing the paperwork and writing prescriptions, and all that we do to keep our patients safe and healthy. While we're writing these laws, we can say, this we would need to do to promote health for our constituents, and the lack of more doctors at the table is something that I can change, particularly for Democrats, where there are currently only 4 Democratic doctors. One more at the table would be tremendous.
And reproductive rights. Are you saying that Congress needs to pass a bill that would basically codify Roe v. Wade or something else?
Reproductive freedom that should be an inherent right for all Americans. I've had to operate on women who are near death from reproductive emergencies. And anything that comes in between our ability to save lives and promote health, from a policy standpoint, we need to get rid of that. So certainly, as a doctor who's seen the end result of some of these restrictive policies, I would be a champion to do whatever I can to ensure that reproductive freedom is protected so that we can continue to save lives. That's one of the main reasons I'm going to Congress, is what can I do with my experience as a doctor, my background as a veteran who has served, what can I do to promote health and safety and continue to save more lives?
Let me ask you about the recent bill, the recent passage of the debt ceiling bill. It was a deal to raise the debt ceiling, but also cut the budget. If you were in Congress, would you have passed that? Would you have voted to pass that?
As in Congress, this debt ceiling debate that keeps coming up, it's a perennial issue. And what we need to really work on is ensuring that we can provide for the needs of all Americans without putting certain populations at risk. That bill it was a disservice to veterans. We talked about cutting veterans care. We talked about cutting health care and social services for many people that need them. So we need to get back to regular order of passing a budget that doesn't come to the edge of brinkmanship every single year. I think many Americans are disheartened by this continual back and forth we have when the budget comes up with related to the debt ceiling. So I will be someone who will champion, like, let's get back to regular order about the budget.
Well, what does that mean? I mean, does that mean that there needs to be a balanced budget amendment that some people call for, or does that mean, forget any debt ceiling and just spend? Because that's really what people want to know.
Right. So with the budget, we've come to this point where we keep passing these major omnibus bills on an annual basis, right? We get to the end of the year, throw everything in there to try to pass everything, as opposed to passing the 12 or so individual budgets throughout the year. So that puts us in a situation where in the year comes and there is this fever pitch to get the budget passed. We can get back, or we should get back to a point where that is not the issue. We have our financial obligations as a nation. We should honor those obligations and not use it as a means to score political points between the parties. So getting back to some sort of recognition that the lives and livelihood of millions of Americans are at stake when we put the budget, make the budget we go back and forth on the budget is something we should avoid. And as a veteran, I've been at the point where I've been stuck out on deployment because we shut down the government. So I know what that means as someone who has served. And I don't want to be part of doing that to future generations or future public servants, or put Americans at risk who depend on us for their care.
Is there room, do you believe, to cut the budget or freeze the budget, the federal budget?
Well, as far as the federal budget, it continues to grow, and I've worked on the healthcare portion of that and noticed that is a huge portion of our federal budget. So what I'd like to be a part of is, what can we do to ensure that within our budget we can meet all of our obligations in defense, education, healthcare, without continuing to grow the budget. However, that was going to require compromise and working between Democrats and Republicans to make that happen. And as a member of Congress, certainly I will be one of those that wants to learn more to be how I can be a contributor to moving forward in a more conducive manner. But I feel that also my role as a veteran, understand service. But I think the key thing I bring is being a doctor and understanding how healthcare finances impact our federal budget, and the role I can do in that particular area to ensure that we have healthcare that's affordable and accessible without causing more problems with our budget.
You mentioned obviously your service to our country. As it relates to foreign policy, China, North Korea, Iran, Russia, maybe there's another country. Which country do you think is the most dangerous to the United States?
Well, as a veteran, I took the oath to defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. And as a member of Congress, I intend to work with many other members who have also understand what it means to serve. As a member of Congress, certainly we look to the Commander-in-Chief for how we will conduct our foreign affairs, also working in conjunction with the executive branch. But as far as who is the most dangerous foreign nation at this moment, I feel I would need to learn more about what exactly are the geopolitical issues that are of concern right now. However, I'm really focused on what are the needs that matter to the constituents in Texas 32. And as I've been around the district, they brought up repeatedly gun violence, health care, reproductive freedom. And as a representative for Texas 32 in Congress, I'll be sure to champion those specific issues.
I wanted to ask you about the border, the situation at the southern border here in Texas. And I'm wondering what your thoughts are about the situation that we've seen gone on there in the last several years.
Well, I've seen it through the lens of public health, particularly during the COVID time period. And I think we need to find some solution that doesn't criminalize or dehumanize everyone that comes to the border, but also doesn't allow free access into the country. And I know there have been bipartisan solutions proposed, and I would certainly be a part of it, but it's, as you mentioned, it's complex. And how do we find that middle ground where we are recognizing the humanity of these folks, of people that are coming across the border, but not also allowing free access to the country. This is a health issue and a security issue as well.
And my last question to you is, what else do you want people to know about you and your campaign?
I want people to know that we're sitting right now in my house in East Dallas. This community means a lot to me. This is where my wife and I have chosen to raise our daughter. We socialize with our neighbors. We're not very far from White Rock Lake at this moment, where I see people on a daily basis when I go down there for a walk or a run. I take this very personally, that I have the privilege and the responsibility to serve this district. But I also feel that I have the record of service to this city, to this county, and to this country on many levels to understand what it means to serve the needs of my community. So I'm asking for the privilege and responsibility to serve in Congress so I can take that same work ethic and ensure that our community continues to thrive for the next generation.
Dr. Brian Williams, thank you so much. We appreciate it.
Jack, thank you very much.
That's all for Eye on Politics this week. I'm Jack Fink. Thank you so much for joining us. You're watching CBS News Texas.